Hi Lyndon, hi Sam. Really good to have you on board. It's been a little bit of a while actually. We've been challenging ourselves to try and get the date in the diary and really focus on getting together. I know how busy you guys are at the moment. I know Iplicit is doing really well at the moment. You've How many mats did you say you got now? I know it keeps on going up.
Since launching at Bet, we've now got our first three under contract, and we've got about 25 in the hopper in discussions.
So that's really positive. That's a really good. I think that's a great sort of growth piece, especially in the education sector, which there's quite a long sort of buying cycle. So I think that's really positive. That's a good sign for going off into the future. And I know what we'll be talking about going forwards is very much along the lines of change and especially within maths as well, and why it's important to sort of probably have a bit of an idea of a sort of process in the way you want to go about change. But before we start there, so first of all, for everyone who's listening, Lyndon, you're the CEO of Iplicit,
Yep.
and Sam, you're a customer success director of Iplicit as well.
Yeah.
And actually, do you know, I think it's really interesting. I've always asked everybody who's come onto one of these fireside chats, where I've started to anyway. I think it's much more important that you give us a sort of a sense of why education really, as much as anything. I know it's a great market. I've been in it for a very long time, but give me your sense of why is education so important to you? So if we, Lyndon, what do you think?
Well, I'd start by saying the education is so important to us because of the product fit and the opportunity we see. But if I pedal back a little bit to give you an intro into Iplicit and where it's come from, you'll then see how we've got to the point of launching in the education market this year. We've been going 4 years now, and from a standing start, we've got over 1,000 organizations and 10,000 users on the platform. But primarily, we started as a solution to the exchequer software users in the commercial market, non-profits and commercial sector. We were an offering to exchequer because a number of our team were born out of the original exchequer team in the 90s and the noughties. And originally, the system we built was a savior for all on-premise exchequer users that had nowhere to go, no way of getting into the cloud in an affordable way, to get a powerful accounting solution that was beyond the likes of the entry-level Xeros and the QuickBooks, but nowhere near as disruptive or expensive as the likes of NetSuite and Dynamics. And that's how we launched in 2019. But what then happened was we started getting inquiries from a whole bunch of on-premise users across a whole bunch of different systems. And we realized that this isn't an exchequer specific scenario. It's across the board. There's multiple vendors that have had lots of success over 10 and 20 years, Sage, Pegasus, Exchequer and the like, 20 and 30 years success putting in systems, but are now have not got acceptable or affordable or sufficiently capable true cloud systems to migrate their base to. So we're enjoying a ramp in the commercial sector and the non-profit, growing fantastically. We went from 5 people to now we're nearly 70 and continuing to grow. And about a year ago, we, as we were expanding, we started taking on staff that had experience in education. And so Iris staff and Arbor staff and so on, and PS Financial staff. And Sam will tell you later about her background, which is very much education as well. And about a year ago, we started to identify and research the education market. And what we found, which all of your listeners will know, is we found that the very strong incumbent in that market in the MAT sector was very much analogous to an exchequer software or Pegasus or Sage, which is a system that had done really well. It had been leading the market, it had taken strong market share, but essentially on-premise, with a number of limitations that come to that with on-premise systems these days, with a need now for the market to move towards cloud and integration with other systems, and in particular with the MAT initiatives in the marketplace needing to add schools at a pace. And on-premise systems are innately restrained by being able to add schools or add legal entities because they're on-premise and there's a lot of cost and disruption associated with that. So we looked at the market and thought, hold on, we can add schools or add legal entities. We can add schools in minutes, not in weeks. We can add them in minutes and get them up and running, low cost and really easy to use. So about a year ago, we started the education project, and we spent a considerable amount of time tailoring our software to be able to launch an education version in March, April at Bet. So why education? because it screams at us that it's another strong vertical where there's an on-premise incumbent and thousands of users or thousands of sites that need something more than the on-premise system can provide. And so we're quite passionate about the fact that we've got a product that will excite people, and we've built an education team around that to make sure we've got the expertise to be able to provide exactly what education needs, the way education needs it.
That's really interesting. Do you know, I was talking to a group of Mats just the other day, and we're thinking about doing like a white paper with them, and it's all about, you know, when their new built academy buildings being built, they've all been told by government they need to have a server room, but none of them want to have a server room. In fact, all of them are moving all their product up to the cloud, which is quite interesting, because, you know, the idea of on-prem now, I think, is something which is, you know, it's old hat. You know, I know I used to work for one, and it is something that basically needs to be, you know, we need to move away from, you know, from a sustainability perspective, not just from a cost of ownership.
And also the other thing that's driving cloud is twofold. One is other cloud systems within the MAT need integration effectively, and cloud-to-cloud integration is simple and seamless, versus on-premise trying to integrate with cloud is a real problem. And the other is the hybrid working aspect. If you've ever got any requirement to access from remote sites, and that could be hybrid working home and office, or could be hybrid working between schools. So you've got resources that need to get access to data, and cloud provides a seamless way of doing that without the paper trail needed physically. You can have it all digitally and without the need to be, you know, on the network. And so, hybrid working, the need for a more efficient workflow, and the need to add schools have all brought us to this sort of position where we've seen, you know, our research showed in 2019, I think the number of MATs were 1170, and in 2022 it was over 1400. And I understand there's over 400 MATs in application right now. So again, there's something really interesting about this market as a vendor, which is it's expanding rapidly by the government edict, the need to grow MATs, add the number of schools, and by luck, as much as anything, our software is, you know, perfectly built to accommodate that. And so we won't take all the credit for, you know, we've got a right time, right place. We've built a system that we thought was just Exchequer. We then realized it was a whole bunch of other vendors, and now we're looking at it thinking this is a perfect education proposition as well.
I'd say, you know, the fact is the academies, you know, is going to continue. There's no doubt about that, in England especially. You know, I think the idea that I think I was talking to, in fact, on the far side chat with Chris Kirk, which is just before this one. We just put it out, and ultimately he does a lot of analysis on the market. And one of the things he's definitely finding is that the MATs themselves will grow bigger. You probably won't get like the EACs and the ELTs as much, but you're definitely going to get the sort of between the sort of 5 and 10s, maybe probably more along the lines of 10s, schools under a MAT. So there's a lot of change, and that means a lot of scaling up, and they need systems that can scale up with them as well. So that's very important. Cool. Sam, so you've now been in the education market for a little while. I won't say a long time, because that'd be almost rude. So I'm going to say for a little while. So, you know, what's so important? Why did you join Iplicit?
Okay, so yeah, I've probably been in education.
Well, by the way, if you want to answer that question when Lyndon's not here, we can ask him to move into another room. I'm only joking.
12, 13 years probably, still in education now, even though I'm obviously over at Iplicit. But yeah, I think, as you know, the MAT movement is continuing. In terms of kind of where I'm at with Iplicit, it's all about this implementation, the support, the account management, how we handhold, multi-academy trust to kind of implement Iplicit. But my previous life was an ops director, where again we supported finance, MIS, ICT, HR, payroll, that type of thing. So and when I kind of left that industry and came back into commercial, I still wanted to have that sort of link back to education, trying to help the sort of the knowledge and the sort of digital transformation that was coming and heading into the sector. So I'm actually currently a vice chair of a MAT in London, 9-school MAT in London. We're primary and special schools. and also the chair of the FRAC committee and safeguarding lead. So, you know, again, voluntary, you know, kind of doing that outside of the day job, as it were. But, you know, when I first saw Iplicit, again, back in 2019, you know, I was coming from the PSF, the FMS, the RMs, you know, that type of space. And I just thought we could give them a run for their money, ultimately, because, again, being such a, you know, an on-premise environment, which is, you know, back then that's where everything was just on-premise. And, you know, there were some people that were, you know, coming into perhaps an online procurement portal, but generally speaking, the whole system was still on-premise. So the fact that we are in the cloud, you've got other MIS systems now that are obviously all in the cloud, as Lyndon said, it is all about integration. And it's so difficult when you're trying to mix an on-premise system with a cloud. It just doesn't work ultimately. And just the scale, you know, the scaling of what MATs have to do, as you said, you know, I think the optimum sort of size of a MAT really does need to be a minimum of 10 schools, if not a little bit more. With the, you know, regional schools commissioners have got their sort of agenda to have these sort of size MATs. So, you know, the smaller MATs either need to scale or they need to join forces. So that there's huge change, which obviously we're going to talk about today, and just how they manage, how they plan for change. What does that sort of look like in different scenarios? So.
And how have you felt, you know, with so I'm completely with you. I think, you know, you need these sort of cloud-based solutions, and it feels even old saying cloud-based solutions, because you sort of go, all industries now, apart from probably a little bit of education, is all cloud. So, you know, it's old technology really still in some ways, but it's very, very important because, you know, as we were talking about cost of ownership, the whole idea, like you say, about data transferring as well, and being able to integrate with different systems, and, you know, I think it's, you know, and sustainability in its own right, you know, so all these, it's more than just sort of going, you know, do you want a system which is easily accessible? And that's what you get from a cloud-based solution. I think, you know, looking at, and this is one thing we always ask of MATs, we sort of say, when you look at a system, even your MIS or whatever it might be, always ask about the rest of your strategies. Don't just sort of go, well, we need it to do X, Y, and Z, you know, these functions. Ask them about, you know, if you've got a sustainability sort of project going on, ask them about how are you going to support us? You know, how are you going to support us with these other aspects of the wider strategy of the MAT as well? And do you think do you think MATs are thinking that the way, or do you think they are still just sort of going, actually, I just need a system to do X, Y, and Z?
I think, unfortunately, it is just they're dealing with one project at a time in the main. We've had a new CEO in the last 18 months, and, you know, we ensured that she was ready to, you know, digitally transform our MAT, and you have to take projects individually, but you've got to have your 3-5 year, you know, strategic plan. That you can have some quick wins, of course you can, but generally speaking, unless you're, you know, planned in terms of, you know, linking back to the budget, you do just have to just go for it. You know, there isn't ever a right time to change, unfortunately. And, you know, if you've got some examples around all that paper trail, all the, you know, even a visitor's guest book, you know, that's still in a book itself, you know, the fact. And as with everything, really, you know, they are trying to balance budgets, trying to give an excellent curriculum to the learners, while still, you know, maintaining the day job. And, you know, certainly in our MAT, over the last 4 years, we've moved, thankfully, to be more digital, but still spend a huge amount of time with manipulating data manually, and, you know, trying to get the sort of the government requirements, the government reporting, just takes days to get that, because you're pulling data from lots of different places. They're not all joined together. They're not singing, not on the same song sheet. So, you know, what we're finding is the fact that if you've got everything in the cloud, the data's accurate, it's live. That's the most important thing. And there's no manipulation. Now, clearly, when you're looking at change, there's a threat there. Of course there is. We're all human. Some people like change, others don't. So, you know, where we're coming from when we implement systems is it's not a scary thing. Ultimately, it's about making sure that people understand why, what's the why there? Because if there's a need and they understand it, then actually it's the unknown that's scary, not the change particularly. And people will go, well, if you automate all of that, and if you do that over there, then that's my job's at risk. Well, it's not. Actually, what you can do is you can actually then analyze the data, help the MAT and the CEO make the strategic decisions that they need to make. And that's the missing piece, isn't it? They're so overworked and they do stupidly long hours because they're manipulating the data, but they also have to make those really, big decisions, which means the long hours. So
absolutely. By you saying that, it sounds like you're doing a lot of long hours with your vice chairmanship and everything else you're doing.
Yeah, possibly, but anyway, yeah. Do as I say, don't do as I do.
Right? Oh, okay. So, but before we start, actually, the first thing I suppose, Lyndon, I would like to ask, really. So, we're going to talk about these 3 pillars of change. So, where did it come from?
Do you want to take that one?
Sam. I should have asked Sam. Sorry.
It's me. Well, like I say, in terms of, change is everywhere. Okay. It's in the commercial sectors. It's definitely in education, as you said. So, so many, outside global events, pandemics, disasters, they all do still have an impact on our education establishments ultimately. We've just come out of the pandemic, and all of a sudden Matt's talking with what Lyndon said before, all of a sudden they've got to go and work from home, and they've got an on-premise system which doesn't work at home, or it's very clunky, or so we've all gone through that in the last 2 or 3 years to transform. Digital transformation is a buzzword in education at the moment. It has been in the commercial sector for a while. As you alluded to, I think education is probably slightly behind the curve on that type of stuff. So where we're coming from in terms of going, Iplicit just ticks those boxes, because you can spin up an environment, you can be anywhere in the country, your teams have got access to live data at a click of a button. It all sings, it all dances, it all links to their other systems. So it just means that people's workloads, yes, they're really, really heavy, okay, in education, ridiculous, but if having some really efficient systems at their at the touch of a button, hopefully that helps them. And so again, I suppose in terms of change, you've got your financial handbooks, and everything is changing, evolving. So when is there a right time to change? If basically you are working for your finance system rather than your finance system working for you, you need to consider changing, and planning that change. Of course, it all comes back to budget. Have you got enough budget in there? MATs, I'm sure, will always have their 3-5 year strategic plan. I know some MATs that I've worked with before write the plan, walk away, and they go, right, I've done that job. But actually, it's evolving all the time. It has to be amended. It has to, adapt to all these different things that head their way. It's changing daily. Life changes daily, but definitely in education. You write a plan 2 months ago, you've got to adapt it. So just having that really pragmatic planning approach, I think, certainly is helping in our MAT. We know our clear direction. We know we've got some quick wins that we can do within budget. We know that actually there's some capital projects that are coming on that we will need to dip into our reserves, because, that's what they're there for. But it's really planned, and just having those sort of systems behind the scenes have really helped, my CEO certainly to make those decisions, and to bring, her staff and the SLT and all of the staff, and actually even parents, on board with the journey. We'll talk about communications later, but that's the best success really is all about comms and engagement ultimately.
Oh yeah, I'm with you there. I think with communication, I work with a couple of MATs, and we don't normally work with MATs as such, but it was more of a friendly, friends that we were helping, and ultimately the any form of transformation, when we were going through the transformation, it was all about making sure everyone was communicated to, because everybody wants to be listened to. and everyone wants to, most people will have an opinion, and some of those opinions are absolutely spot on and things that haven't been considered. So you do that communication piece, I think, is quite fundamental, even to the point, like you said, I think, of sort of going, these are the benefits, these are the reasons why we're doing the change. And this is where, at the end, there may be some pain, but at the end, this is what I suppose, the utopia or the North Star looks like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously with change, if it's dealt right at the very beginning, if it's planned, if it's communicated well, really the end result has always got to be positive.
Yeah.
You're not going to change for the sake of changing, and education don't have the time to do that either. There's got to be a huge need for them to embark on projects, MIS, finance, all their other systems. They're not just going to do it willy-nilly for no reason. So there has to be that positive end, and that has to be communicated at the beginning to bring everybody along with the journey.
I agree. And so actually, something quite interesting that comes up is, so it might not be the case so much now, but there was a point, because they're so busy in schools, when Matt took on schools, then there was lots of product out there which wasn't even being used. In some cases, they thought actually. I remember one time being in Sims, and they were moving away from Sims, and they lost a lot of partner products, and they basically went, "But that's Sims, yeah." So they were thinking that they still had these partner products, and they were still paying for them, but they thought it was actually part of Sims, and they were saying, "Why are we paying Sims still when we're moving Sims?" Why, these sort of things. So there's lots of product, I think, sometimes in schools which hasn't been used, and that's because it hasn't basically been, implemented inappropriately or widely enough. And in some cases, and also I've heard from learning, learning providers that say the same thing, where basically somebody somebody will buy something, and then they'll say, "Oh, we need to move to another learning environment because actually this one doesn't work." And it's not because it didn't work, it's because it didn't get implemented correctly, in the sense of they didn't persist with learning and continuing to get the benefit from the product. So how do you get through that in Iplicit?
Well, again, I think once you have an understanding of where technology is going, so technology is moving all the time, and you can't just implement a piece of software and then forget about it. That was the on-premise days, I guess, because you have something, it's not going to change, it's not going to move, you'll use it, but with SaaS cloud products, they're ever evolving. We are releasing versions all the time throughout the year. So, again, when we do implementations, it is about saying, actually, you've got this partnership now. We've got a partnership that we want to make sure that you utilize the products, that you take, advantage of the new functionality and features, because they are going to keep coming. OCR, document automation, all of those things are just going to keep on coming. So they do have to have that sort of investment plan. Certainly with finance, if we're talking about that for a moment, they have to have that investment plan to always keep their staff trained, to always keep, on top of that technology, because as a vendor, we're the ones that are driving that technology for them. We like to think that in terms of education, that they can look back and think, actually, do you know what? We're in good, safe hands with Iplicit, because we know that when there's good technology coming, it will be in the product, we can take advantage of it. So it is about just, again, having that mindset of you have to evolve your systems and processes in line with changes. When we implement Iplicit into a MAT, we aren't looking at just what they want now. We're looking at how they're going to grow in 3 to 5 years' time. How many, schools are they going to be in 5 years' time? How easy is that? I mean, I had a conversation with a MAT the other day, and we were explaining, the way that they've got 2 or 3 schools that they're adding in September, another 4 in Jan, and she's like, "Okay, well, tell me how long is it going to take me to add a new school?" And I said, "Well, minutes." She said, "Oh, how then?" I said, "Because we'll train you to add them into the environment." Yeah. It's that straightforward. And of course, that's not where they're coming from. They're coming from days, maybe weeks of adding a MAT on, the huge costs associated with it. And she sort of took a step back and went, "That can't be right." And I said, "It is, honestly, it is. I've been where you are. I've used your system in the past. Genuinely, it's going to be that straightforward." So, again, there's a change there to their system and processes.
That is interesting, and I know this is a sales meeting as such, but it's quite interesting because one of the reasons that lots of schools have said, or Mats have said, that they won't move is move MIS as an example, or change to another system, is actually down to finance. They're not willing to actually, because it's a high risk area in most people's eyes, because finance is finance, isn't it? It's really important. Money is important. It basically pays for people, it pays for the payroll, it pays for the books, it pays for, all the software. If you don't have your finances in order, then that's probably the highest risk in people's eyes. Anyway, I appreciate you'll probably say, wait a minute, it's easy, but in in their eyes, it's a high risk area. So, and the reason why they won't change to other systems if they're connected is because of the fact it's either they perceived it's going to be too hard, and actually mid-term or mid even year, they don't like to do it because they think they're going to lose data. What would you say to Matt around that?
Well, we've had some interesting conversations since BET, actually, because we were told that there's a very much of a cycle and there's no implementations in certain periods of the year, and it's got to coincide with term and so on, because of the risk and that. And as I say, straight out of the gates, we've secured Mats under contract. We've got systems going live this side of Christmas, and we've got a number of others in the hopper. I think, as Sam just mentioned, with their eyes open when it comes to, there's just not an understanding of how easy it is to add a school and what that means. And what we're really identifying, two things that we do very, very differently than existing vendors. One is a school in minutes, add a school in minutes as and when, and we'll train you to do it. So that becomes very interesting for them as they recognize they've got to add 5, 6, 7 schools. And a lot of the Mats, as you say, they're 3 to 5 schools right now, knowing they've got to get to 10 or more. But the other thing is we also get involved with all of the data migration and archiving from the old system. And that's something I think other vendors have sort of stood back. And we see this in the commercial world as well as in education. The vendors stand back and they say, no, that's your business. There's a table we'll give you a sort of format of what we want to receive, but you work that out. Yeah. Whereas what we do is we do the migration and any archiving required and enable you to shut down your old system all as part of the implementation. So we don't even see that as a barrier in a way that we're talking to education people and they're saying, I have to provide for this month of hell when I've got to do these things. And then we're identifying, no, that we do that as part of the system. You don't need to worry about that. We'll do that in the implementation. And it doesn't take very long either because we built the tools to do it. So we can do things that might have taken people weeks. We can do things in a couple of days because we built tools to extract from old systems into new and archive in the right way. And again, that's just another facet of building in cloud and building true cloud. It's just a lot more nimble. Everything we do is a lighter touch and able to be implemented a lot faster. And that's coming from a whole bunch of original founders in our business where they were involved in on-premise in the past and they were involved in high-end ERP. And so it's not always been that way with us, but because of that involvement in the past, it's what's inspired what we've done now to be really light touch and be really nimble and be effective. So back to your original point about the fear of change or why would they do it? We're actually seeing now that there's two fears being presented to the average CFO, finance director within a MAT. One is, how am I going to keep adding schools with my current system? How am I going to digest that? Or how am I going to consume smaller MATs and bring them into the group when they've got a different system? How are we going to merge systems? What we've got to do something. My current system doesn't cope. And then that's offset as well a little bit by fear of change, which is I've got to do something. But I think on balance, when we have the conversations and we do the demonstrations, on balance, the fear is more on inertia and staying with what they've got than it is changing to something that's a lot more nimble. And particularly if you're consuming schools or smaller MATs with different systems, then you've got change no matter what. You've got change because you've got to get the two together. And so if there's one uniform cloud system that works for everybody at low cost relative to the number of schools, then it helps with the fear. It doesn't mean the fear is not there, but I think the fear is certainly getting less. And the more we case study the MATs that have made the transition, the more, the ones that we've just taken on board, there's a couple of PSF, there was a Sage 200, and we've got a number in the hopper that are both of those and more. in terms of old existing vendor system. But the more we can case study it and say, look, they've been through this decision, they've had the fear, they've had the pain, and now look where they are. And we managed to do that in effectively inside a quarter. And the way we implement is in days. And that's another thing that's quite different. The entire system can go in days. So the idea it's got to be done at a certain time of year and we're fearing losing data and so on, that will change over time. And Mats will start to recognize, I can do it when I like, I'll just do it at a quarter end. It really is digestible. And that's the thing. People tend to work in the way that they think things work, therefore they cope with the rules that they've been given. I've got to spend all summer doing this because it's so arduous. Whereas actually we're starting to demonstrate you don't. You can do it in a couple of weeks over Christmas or into the new year, and it works.
I think that's really, and it's something that basically all ed tech companies should listen to, and that is, it's all about the frictionless, creating a frictionless sort of environment for customers. I think there's too many times, sometimes systems get built and they're built on the line of, this is a product you can have. Oh, look at all the features it can do. But actually, what you want to do is sell a solution, which is everything around the outside of it as well. How easy is it to actually implement? How can you take away some of the pain and some of the concerns and that you've been talking about? That is actually the best. That's the best way of implementing a solution or building a solution, is by thinking about how you make it as frictionless as possible and take away some of the concerns and the anxieties that basically customers have. You should make it ultimately, utopia is, from the point of awareness of the product to the point where you get the value, should be as easy for the customer as possible. And that includes purchasing, everything else. But yeah, that's interesting. And like I say, it's something I think some ed tech companies really do need to listen to, because, there is definitely this sort of, I suppose from the technician perspective, they've created a product and gone, this product is amazing, it's got all these features, but not really thought hard enough about what the customer is, the experience they're going to go through. So I think that's really, really interesting. For sure.
I guess when you're thinking about, normally it would be, I need to go live at the beginning of my financial year. But you've got audit looming. You've got to shut down you've got all that stuff and noise that's happening. You've got your day jobs. It's a busy time. Actually, probably better you don't implement a new system at that point. But again, the fear is, well, what happens to the data? I've got half here and half there. And, again, as Lyndon said, it is all part of our implementation. We make sure that it's as seamless and as smooth as possible. And, the beauty of having the experience we have certainly in my team and my background and some of the other guys in the business, is we've been there before. We have done it before. So, yes, okay, Iplicit might be a new name out there, but actually the experience in the business, we've got a number of years under our belt. So we will try and make the customer experience, the customer journey, as seamless as possible, because why make it difficult? We don't need to anymore. I think that is that change, the mentality, the technology, that all allows us now to make things much, much, much straightforward.
And also, new companies coming into a particular sector is fresh. It freshens up the sector. It adds a little bit more competition, makes everyone fight harder, creates the innovation. It's a great thing. When you end up with just one or two constant sort of competitors, you get to the point where innovation starts lacking, because they're more worried about each other than they are more about what else can they do. I think sometimes that's great.
Also, I think we see this across all the sectors we're involved with. It's a cyclical thing in generations, because you get really strong vendors that do a really great job and they can do it for 10 or 15 or 20 years. But they then become dependent on the thing that they're doing. And therefore, sort of innately, they become stagnant because they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. And quite often we see the same analogy of what we're doing. We feel like we're Netflix looking at Blockbuster. And we can't quite believe just how much the incumbent vendors with on-premise systems have just not changed with the times. But equally, like with Blockbuster and like with Kodak in many ways as well, when your entire business is based on a way of doing things which was worked for decades, it's very difficult to evolve your entire culture and crew and proposition out of that into something else that's yet to really prove itself. So quite often it takes a newcomer to really disrupt. So streaming disrupted, DVD rental, and digital disrupted film and so on. And so in some ways, in fairness to all those people that are stuck there saying, I've got a wrong system, how have I got to this position, or have I done something wrong? The reality is no. It's like many of these systems have been great for many, many years. And many of the systems we replace have been in for 10 or 15 years. So they've clearly done a great job. It's just they're old, they're just leggy, and it's time for change. And often over that period of time, the old guard isn't necessarily the new. And Iplicit, when I first met the founder of Iplicit, it was 7 years ago now, he'd spent 23 years in high-end ERP implementation, much bigger than the game we play in now. Thousands of desktops, multi-year implementations for multi-million-pound systems. So, a completely different world. But his 23 years in that environment is what inspired and fueled everything that was wrong with that, everything that was overly engineered, overly complex, overly charged, held the customers hostage. That was the very inspiration for something coming out. And he, for 3 years before I met him, pioneered just pure development of a true cloud system. Iplicit's his brainchild with the development team. He spent his life savings. He spent savings of someone else, one of his mates as well. Spent a lot of money in a lot of years with no customers and with no go-to-market strategy. Just spent 3 years building something because he knew it needed to be built. And when I first met him, it struck me as madness, because it's like the quickest way to go broke is build a system with no idea where it's going. But actually, the moment we got it into the market and we started seeing the traction, that madness was genius. Because actually, the only way to get true disruption and true change is you build something from scratch without concern of what the customers or the committees or the budgets or the existing revenues think. Because the moment you take all these into account, you're compromising. Whereas if you actually build almost in the dark and say, I know what's needed. I've spent 23 years in this industry. And he built a pure play, true cloud thing that now stands us in such good stead. And there's, in the finance world, there's only been a couple that have really been true cloud plays in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, NetSuite came to market, and that disrupted the high end. And 10, 12 years ago, Xero came to market. And actually, Iplicit really suits the mid-market, the mat-sized organizations that have, the complexities way beyond the entry level, but nowhere near the budgets and disruption for the higher end stuff. And so, it's sort of madness turned genius turned perfect timing for why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I fully understand. I fully agree and understand. I think, disruption of your own markets, there are loads of examples, the Hoovers, like you say, the Kodaks and everything else. And it normally comes back to, you would also be reasonably mad to go to the board and say, at the moment, this is Hoover bags are making us X billion pounds. By the way, we're going to get rid of them.
Yes,
it'd be a hard conversation to have to sort of go, yeah, let's get rid of that. Yeah, let's start selling something else, unless you're reassured that it's going to be successful. So that's the trouble about big companies, I think, sometimes. But yeah, I agree. I think going into I would also argue, like you said, he understood the need, which I think is very, very important. It's the same with the sort of Ford sort of quote of, if I asked the customer, they would have said, get faster horses.
Yes. Exactly right. And actually, he understood the need at a pure level of just finance, true cloud finance. He wasn't concerning himself with the individual challenges and the tailoring and so on, but that follows. But build the platform correctly, and then everything else becomes a lot easier. So the organization we're building all benefits from the fact that one mad guy and his team decided to just throw it all up in the air and bet on a passion of things need to change. And
so mad guy's not going to watch this, though, no?
So yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll steer it away from him.
Excellent. So Sam, you're talking about change as well. Sorry, we sort of went off into a little bit of. I took us in a sort of bit of a tangent, but we talked about change. And when you talk to your mats, the mats that you're talking to, one of the things I think is you said about knowing when is the right time to change. And is that a case of any time, or do you what sort of conversation do you have?
I guess really there is any time to change. Of course, when you're thinking about a VAT quarter, that might make sense. Maybe it is at the financial year end or start. There is, again, with that, there isn't a wrong time to change. I think you just need to, understand again what the customer's kind of workload is about, talk to them around, okay, well, are you going to have 3 or 4 new schools? Okay, well, maybe we'll do phase 1 now. Let's get you up and running because it's easy to add schools. So it does depend on obviously the individual circumstances. But I actually do get involved in some of the pre kind of sale process and talking to the MATs about the implementations and speaking to them and understanding how other vendors implement. We do a lot more, and in days. It's not even more money. It's just as a service, and because the product is so flexible and agile, we can do much more for the customer to get them to move. I guess proof is in the pudding, and there's obviously always some nervousness about change that comes from anything, but we can demonstrate how easy it is to do something, and we do demonstrate. We will make sure we want to put Iplicit out in front of as many people as possible. We're not scared of demoing it, we're not scared of showing it to them, and just giving them examples, giving evidence that actually this is right. We've been doing it for the last 4 years in commercial. We've got some really, really large customers there, which again, will equate to some of the larger MATs that we'll talk to in the future. But yeah, I think for me, it's all about understanding their current position, their current situation, and adapting the implementation and ongoing support. I think that's also the key thing. The support mechanism after go live, they've got it there, and they're not going to be left alone. And we certainly handhold them through the first 2 or 3 months of being live to make sure that they can run their accounts, they can do their VAT 126, they can do their BFR. We'll make sure that is part of that implementation, and there's almost like a post-implementation support before it heads into my actual support team, which obviously they get as well. So yeah, I think it's listening, it's understanding, and it's building that implementation plan around, that individual trust and how they're going to grow. They've got growth strategies, and we need to make sure that we're not implementing a system that, like I said before, was just fit for now. It's got to a scale, and it's got to be set up in a way that it's easy for them to grow in the next 3 to 5 years and hit where they need to hit as well from a strategic point of view.
On the knowing when to change as well, I think there are 2 key criteria that we're seeing with our early conversations. Once the MAT has got a strategy for growth, and that's something that they haven't all got, but in the conversations, it's like, well, what stage is that at? Are you looking to acquire? Or are you looking to be consumed? But once they've got a stage for a plan for growth, I think the 2 natural triggers for knowing when to change. One is, at what point does your contract renew with your existing system? Because that's something where, do you want to renew a contract if you know it's going to need changing in the imminent future? Don't keep going down that road. And then the other one is, at what point are you going to be acquiring more schools into your fold? Because again, if you know you've got to change, then the 2 things you're juggling with is contract length and new acquisitions, because if you bring new ones in and then you've got to put them into the same fold, and you're taking them down the wrong road. So those are the 2 things that we often see are the triggers that we juggle with. And that's why, when we're looking at a hopper of MATs, it's really around, at what point is your decision made for the next step, either contract renewal or school acquisition. And it may be a hybrid where, on one of our schools, one of our MATs we've brought on board, we're bringing on the new schools first. So actually, the next 4 come onto the new system, while the existing base will migrate at the end of the contract. So again, it could be hybrid to start with, to enable them to phase across, rather than it have to be, we've got to keep going down the wrong road, or we've got to bin an existing contract, which neither's desirable.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense, and it's quite interesting because Sam, you were saying also that you sort of come along to lots of the sort of sales conversations, and I suppose to a large degree, and I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but if you're then taking them, holding their hand from that perspective, and they know who you are and they know who your team is all the way through, I'm guessing you create that sort of, again, going back to the point of, a product is a product, but the solution is much wider. You get that sort of more of a partnership, a sort of approach where you sort of go, we want to basically, we're invested in making this work as well, which must give your customers a sense of comfort as much as anything else. Because I know sometimes, you can definitely buy something from a certain businesses, and there's almost sort of go, yeah, we'll sell you some services, but then almost get on with it sort of type of scenario.
Yeah, definitely. It is absolutely about relationship building and those partnerships for sure. Because as we've said before, just some indicators within a MAT about whether they need to change or not. Again, I've talked about the paper side of things. You've got all that really fantastic technology with, OCR and document automation and things like that. So, a finance department might go, do you know what, I need 2 more people now to process invoices because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, that I'm not suggesting we cut down the finance team, but they've got to recruit 2 more people. So when you're looking at a budget, which obviously as chair of the FRAC committee, I have to keep, quite tight on our budgets. Do we need extra headcount with all the on costs, with all the pensions, with all the pension deficits that we're all facing right now? Do we need additional headcount? I'm not suggesting removing headcount. It's about additional, or actually those 2 heads will pay for your finance system for the next 5 years. So when you're talking about your budget setting, when you're talking about what headcounts we need in addition to what you've got to, support the growth of the MAT, again, that's a key indicator to say, actually, I won't need those 2 people because this software will allow us to, automate that process. And the people that are wasting their time manipulating data entry, duplication, paper approval still that happens, in multiple organizations, I think, still at the moment. It's just noise that they don't need to do. And it means then that you've got your finance team that you can make best use of their skills and their knowledge elsewhere. That's going to, again, help the cause, help the strategy, help with obviously all of the other challenges that education establishments have on a daily basis.
And it makes it very explicit the value of your system. So, if the customer realizes they don't need, or they can reassign those 2 people to doing something else, and that's basically save the money, they automatically understand your value proposition without having, let's face it, we all read marketing materials and sometimes we sort of go, really? Is it going to really do that? So, but if it actually is true and they can visibly see it, then I think it's, that adds a lot of weight to people then talking about it to other friends, and when I mean friends, other MATs and other sort of academies,
their peers and their network and everything else, and I think that when you're in a MAT and you're growing and you're not alone, there are other MATs next door to you that are in the same situation, etc. But again, kind of interesting in terms of just looking at utilizing your staff and your skills and their skills in the best way, I think again is a key thing. But funnily enough, when we've been on to sales meetings, and they're not perhaps even customers of ours yet, we've really encouraged them to bring their teams along. So it isn't just the CFO that's looking. Yep, they might have had an initial demo, but all the other demos that we have with them, it's about bringing the their staff along with them, because the moment they can see sight of it, and of course they'll be going, oh gosh, am I going to lose my job if this system is going to do exactly what they say it's going to do? But, again, it's about that conversation and the partnership, and you do start to allay their fears and they go, brilliant, actually, I could go away and do what I should be doing, because it will tick the box, So again, it is all about, we encourage as many users in the finance team to come along to those meetings, because, again, engaging them, making sure that they've, had an opinion, they've had to ask questions, we listen to their feedback, and that's really been successful, certainly in the MATs that we've been talking to this year.
And that probably comes on to the point of what you were sort of alluding to earlier, which is communication is absolutely paramount when change happens, or implementing a new system. And full stop, I think it's over communicating sometimes is far better than no communication at all. It'd be all the Chinese whispers, otherwise it'll be all the insecurities that get communicated out, like you just said, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. And then that person tells lots of other people they're going to lose their job. And, you sort of go, the communication piece on change has to be reasonable, has to be really watertight.
It does, yeah. I think in terms of communication strategies, MATs have lots of them. It's not just changing systems, it's all the other things, even bringing a new school on, or, whatever that may be. So when you're talking about communications, it is that whole strategic planning with regards to the comms. That MATs are faced with all sorts of outside influences or challenges. And you've got to bring them along right at the very beginning on the journey. Have to. Again, as we've said before, it's not the change that's scary, although that's what people probably think it is. It's actually the unknown. Yeah. If you've got a platform to be able to ask those questions and all the rest of it, I think people go, oh, okay, yeah, actually, this is good. Because not everyone in the organisation is going to understand the challenges and the reasons why we need to change. So, be clear, concise, explain why. And as I say, there's always positives after change. The scary thing is about, am I going to lose my job? The threat of technology, when people go, oh gosh, I'm not technical, I'm going to really struggle with this whizzy new system. Absolutely not. We're all technical one way or another. We've all got our mobile phones.
Yeah, I'd look for my mobile phone, then I was going to say, even I am.
And they've gone through a huge change with, having Zoom meetings and everything else over the last couple of, so everybody is technical. The thing is, we take that noise away. Yes, our system is really sophisticated. It's very clever. It's really easy to use, and it's really straightforward to learn. And again, we try and demonstrate that when we show them the product, what you see, what you get, and you learn a particular thing, and it's the same process in lots of different areas: purchase ledger, sales ledger, purchase orders. It's really quick to pick up. So yeah, again, it's about us communicating well with our new customers, but vice versa in terms of the MATs. Just bring your team on board early, and explain things. I think I've had a number of implementations under my belt, over my career, and some have been bad. Majority have been good because you've engaged the right people across the organisation early, and the resistance to change just probably doesn't disappear, but it certainly is lessened because you brought everyone on at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. I think as long as you continue that communication as well, then to be honest with you, I think you can almost get to the point of minimizing or mitigating any negative feelings about things, because I think it's very easy for people to forget the reason why. Why are we doing this? And I think continue to keep on communicating that, and that's the same with businesses. Business should have an internal communication plan as much as they should have an external communication plan, just to make sure everyone is constantly always aware of the reason, the purpose, the why, and also how successful you are, again, internally as well as externally as well. So it's very important.
Definitely. I mean, education, we're looking after, public money. It's not even our money, so you're held accountable. Let's just make it easy for people, to be able to explain the finances really well at all different levels. Even at a trust board, you've got different levels of, education people, business people, commercial people. We have to come to an agreed communication that everybody understands. It's the same inside the organisation as well.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, one question each. It's going to be an interesting one. So Lyndon, the one I want to ask you is why change to Iplicit? Do you know, I didn't do it all the way through.
Why change to Iplicit?
Yeah, why change to Iplicit?
I think categorically it's the need for the MAT to grow and the pain of trying to grow with an on-premise system. So the existing systems that the vast majority of MATs are using today are on-premise, and the ability to grow and add schools is completely restrained with the existing system, and the ability to integrate is almost non-existent. And so begin with the end in mind. Where are you trying to get to, and how do you then get there? We'll begin with the end in mind. We'll have 10 plus schools, and we want solutions that are seamless across each school and integrated with other applications, HR, payroll, safeguarding, and so on. And so that can't be done with on-premise. It's just full stop. It can't be done with on-premise. So take my Iplicit hat off and just say what needs to happen in the sector. the entire sector needs to go cloud. That's just a given. That's the same in commercial, non-profit, and so on. Cloud is absolutely the way forward. There's no way back to on-premise. And so if you then say, right, we do need to move to cloud, so what's available? And then actually Iplicit is award-winning, best of breed for the mid-market. And so why Iplicit? It's powerful, it's affordable, and it's really low in the disruption side of things. So we can implement really quickly and generate a really clear ROI for any Matt that's interested. So that's a long answer of why, but basically it does the job you need it to do as you migrate to cloud. And I think that's a given in the next sort of 2, 3, 4 years.
Cool. And Sam, I'm going to ask you a bit more, probably a bit harder question actually, but I think it's very sorry, but it's putting both your hats on of being, you know, vice chair of a MAT, as well as obviously you work in commercial organisations as well. So if you were going to tell, if you could ask other vendors to basically change their approach, what 3 things would you ask them to change that you find really difficult sometimes? And things that you've learned from, you know, being in Iplicit or in other commercial organisations that you think will be really important. I did tell you it's a harder one.
Tough one. I think so. I in terms of advice to vendors about what to change, again, for me, it is making sure that you've got that partnership with the customer and you understand their requirements and their needs, and you can give them a really straightforward solution that's going to make their lives easier. Because any implementation, if it's badly done, is going to make someone's life harder. And so if you're going to, you know, make the leap, change, you know, your finance team's life ultimately with the systems, if we're talking finance, even if it's MIS, you've just got to make it a change for, you know, for ease, and just make it seamless. So it's about having that, listen to the requirements, make sure that the solution is suitable and scalable for, you know, the next 3, 5, 10 years. That's one. Secondly, I think, again, it is taking a step back from the vendor's point of view, as we've done with Iplicit. And, you know, we have a commercial finance software, fine. And we listened to the market. We've done a huge amount of research in the market for education, let's say, to know whether actually Iplicit is a right fit, because we will not enter into education if it's not the right fit. So we've looked at, you know, benchmarking, we've invested in research and documents and things, you know, that we've been able to really get a good understanding about whether Iplicit actually fits the education market. And it does, and it all came back singing and dancing. So again, I guess, you know, advice is, research. Make sure that the solution you're putting into education is actually fit for purpose, and it's not going to be effectively a barrier for them to scale and grow as they need.
And would you argue also the environment piece, you know, the fact that basically they're concerned about mid-term or mid-year, so build a solution that meets all, you know, the sort of I suppose the emotional needs as much as the actual product needs. So
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you know, we have moved our MIS system recently, and that's a huge upheaval. You know, that probably the MIS touches more than the finance does in terms of the organisation. And, you know, it went okay. I think it could be better. I wasn't part of it, but clearly, you know, when we're in our board meetings, I think it could be better. And again, I think that comes down to, it was a SaaS product. We know it does its thing. We know it does it well on paper. The reality, when you come to do that, was that kind of what we were sold? Possibly not. But to the same end, it was all about that implementation and just trying to make it as easy as possible. And, you know, again, we got there, we're happy with it, but I think it was all around, you know, just making sure that we had the right product that was just really seamless to integrate with the business and other systems, but also the implementation. It all comes back to that for me, and just having the good understanding of what all the requirements are, and you're basically helping, you're leaving them, and then you support them after. So it is that aftercare for me also that can't be ignored. That is really, really important, because you know, we're hopefully going to be partners of Matt's for the next 10 to 20 years. You know, that's we're not there just quickly to put something in and run away. So yeah, support, aftercare support, really, really important to focus on that as well.
Cool. Well, I want to say a massive big thank you. But before I go, there's one other person in the room that we didn't introduce. He's been really, really good.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to move, Sam.
Oh.
Just lean this way. There she is.
Oh. What's her name, Lyndon, again?
It's Lola. She's in tech support.
I thought customer.
Having a quiet day because our software is so amazing. She doesn't need to do anything. She's sitting in front of the fire.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant. Excellent. A big thank you for your time. I appreciate you're busy people. And like I say, it's taken us a while to sort of get the right dates in and align diaries and stuff. So that's been, you know, so I appreciate it's always hard. So thank you very much for your time. I think from my perspective, you know, I think there's a number of things, you know, I think people should or hopefully get from this. And I think one of them is, you know, ultimately working with the customer on change and understanding when and supporting and making sure they feel comfortable about the changes happening is quite important. Especially seeing, I think lots of people do get have some form of anxiety over change in the sense of they don't understand why they're doing the change, or they find that basically it's going to distract from all the other things they think they're going to be doing. So I think change can sometimes just be a barrier and mentally in your mind, and taking your best foot forward needs, I think, a business to basically highlight to them the value they're going to get from that at the end. So I think, you know, really do work hard with your customer at the beginning. I think making sure they also get a really good, strong support, as you're talking about, Sam, you know, towards, you know, from even a point of sale all the way through to the point of value, I think is really important, and then ongoing, and then continuing to listen. And like you said, you know, you already have been listening to the market to understand, you know, those nuances of need, and I think that's really important to understand. You know, make sure you constantly listen. Everybody wants to be heard, and that's part of that sort of communication piece. Really, making sure that, you know, you're listening to everybody. I think that's really, really important. So a big thank you for your time. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you soon.
Great.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
Take care.